Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Modern Adoption, the podcast where we explore the frontiers of adoption, striving to modernize every aspect of this complex journey. My name is Jess. I'm a two-time birth mom.
And my name is Erin. I'm a two-time adoptive mom, and we are your hosts. Each episode, we bring you insightful interviews with experts and discussions on the latest advancements in adoption. And we're not just here to talk, we are here to inspire change. Happy holidays. Happy holidays. We're heading in. I won't sing anymore, I promise. We are heading into the holiday season, and that means it's time for family dinners and Friendsgivings and holiday parties with all of your well-meaning, well-intentioned family members and friends and coworkers who, to be kind, probably want to know all of the details about how your adoption journey is going. And while they mean well and are coming from a place of love, they will sometimes step on a landmine and ask questions that are unintentionally intrusive or insensitive, or it could be really painful to answer. I know for sure I've had those like pangs in my gut, like, do I correct this person here or do I just let it slide? So anyhow, today Jess and I wanted to talk about how to navigate some of those difficult conversations that just feel like they're amplified during the holiday season. And so let's start. Jess, why don't we talk through some of the topics that we want to touch on today so people know what we'll cover?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to get into some of those uncomfortable conversations and where they can present themselves or what they can entail. From just using the wrong language to misinformation. We definitely want to talk about ways that you can answer those questions, but still protect your child's story. And then also some tips for getting through the holiday season.
Yeah, great. Let's start with that kind of almost that second one that you talked about. Just that, well, I always call it people being kind of like, they're misinformed about adoption. And
yeah,
I think a lot of people I had it when we were starting this process, like there is like, and I think it really is mainstream media, that we get this narrative that is, like that they're just misinformed in terms of what adoption actually is, and especially open adoption.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, so they'll say things like negative things almost about a birth family, that like, oh, thank goodness you're going to be saving that child. Or, we got
that
a lot
child
of like,
is so
God bless
lucky.
you. Yeah. Yeah. As soon as people knew we were on the journey. And again, like it comes from a place of love. And do you want to spend your holiday dinner educating them? It's up to you.
Right.
But I do think it does kind of adoption, all of it, the entire triad, a disservice if you just let it slide. And I think there's some simple ways that you can address it. Yeah, because I just the birth family will most likely be involved in our child's life.
Yeah. I mean, we say it all the time.
90% of adoptions are open now.
Exactly. And we say it all the time. You don't know what you don't know. And so many people just get their adoption information from the media, or they know someone who was adopted 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, and they don't understand how much adoption has changed and evolved. And so you can use this as a time to educate people, showcase what you've learned throughout this journey, but you don't have to. You can just as easily, protect your peace and not educate every single person that you come in contact with.
Yeah. And I think one of the narratives that I think what we heard a lot was, there's so many kids that need homes.
Yes.
And people just assume that that's what is, that's what's happening in private adoption. And that is true in foster. There are thousands of children in every state looking for a home.
But when it comes to...
But BTW, that home, say it again.
I was just going to say, but when it comes to domestic infant adoption, there are not so many children waiting for a home or needing a home. There are around 75 adopting families for every infant that is going to be placed for adoption in the US.
Yeah, and I think that's a fine thing to say at the dinner table, like, "Hey, actually, you know what? It's totally changed now." Like,
Yeah,
yes, there are kids that are looking to be temporarily placed because they're in a foster situation, but in private adoption, the path that we're pursuing because we want a child permanently placed in our house, it's
yeah.
actually like 75 families for every one child born.
Mhm.
So I think that's something else. One of the other kind of narratives that I've always heard about too is like this assumption that this like kind of fear-based narrative that they're like, well, so then like people assume you would never see the birth family again.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
they assume if the birth family had any involvement, they would try to steal the child back.
And
And and so
think
that like being able to address that too is I think very important.
yes. Yes. Because I feel like so many people's perspective of birth families and open adoption is what they see in Lifetime movies. And your child's birth family is not going to show up in the dead of night and try to steal your child back. That is not open adoption by any means, but I feel like that's the perspective that so many people have. And so they shocked or taken aback when you say, you know, that you have an open adoption or your kiddo's birth family is going to be joining you for the holidays or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that to me also that kind of fear-based approach, I think that's another one that like don't let that slide
No.
because it can be another one. It's an easy one to correct. Like actually, that's another thing that has dramatically changed in the last 20 years. Now 90% of adoptions are open, and isn't it awesome that an expectant woman making this huge decision gets to choose from that many families and can get really specific about what she wants. Like
Yeah.
it's a very you don't have to like, wag your finger at anybody. You can just like simply educate them.
Hmm.
And what if that spurs some kind of a cool conversation? You never know. Okay, and so then the other one that I just like it is like nails on a chalkboard to me is negative adoption language.
Yes. And again, you don't know what you don't know. You can't always fault people for using the wrong language, saying, using the phrase give up instead of placed, or gave up instead of made an adoption plan, or, saying how lucky that child is that you adopted them, or anything along those lines. But if you have the bandwidth to correct and educate, you can do your friends and family a world of good by starting early and helping them understand the right adoption language, because it will only benefit you in the long run, especially if you're just starting out your adoption journey, or you're waiting to get matched, or you've been matched and you're waiting for the baby to get here. If you're educating and kind of correcting some of that negative adoption language before that kiddo is even here, then they're not going to hear it, down the road. If you can kind of nip that in the bud early on, you'll be doing a world of good for your future kiddo.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then the kind of the last one is for some reason this comes up too, but like people assume that this is all about money.
Yeah.
And I think again, like doing birth parents like giving them the respect they deserve in this process. Like this is not always just about money. This is about a number of variables. And so just making sure that people know that this isn't for lack of a better, very crass term, a money grab.
Yeah.
That this is a giant emotional decision that where people are weighing a number of different factors when they're making this huge decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of ties into making sure that you're protecting your kiddo's birth story. And again, this is great advice if you are just starting your journey or waiting to be matched. You can kind of keep these things in the back of your mind when you are talking to your friends and family or coworkers. But also, if you already have adopted, and you've possibly made some of these mistakes in talking about your kiddo and their adoption story. Maybe this is good advice for how to change the narrative a little bit and how you're talking about your kiddo's adoption story. But you want to make sure that you're protecting your child's story, whether you have that child already or talking about your future kiddo. And especially when that comes to their kind of birth story and the circumstances surrounding their birth, you are probably going to know the reasons why that expectant mom or those expectant parents are choosing adoption and making an adoption plan. Your entire friends and family network does not need to know that. They do not need to know her struggles with homelessness or addiction, or if that kiddo is God forbid, a product of sexual assault. Like, those details are for you to know and your child to know one day. That is not something that everybody needs to know.
I couldn't agree more. Not to mention, it's also not your story to tell.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
In
And
terms of like, of course, like,
yes. And I think it's also really important to keep in mind that you don't want your child to hear those details from anyone but you. And family members are well-meaning and well-intentioned, but we're all still human. And so one day down the road, your aunts, uncles, grandparents could slip and drop some of those details that might not be the most positive details about their adoption story or the circumstances surrounding their placement or birth. And your kiddo shouldn't hear those details from anyone but you. And so when you're being really cognizant about the details that you're sharing and how you're sharing them, I think you do a better job of protecting your kiddo or your future kiddo, and also your relationship with their birth family. And I know that it's hard sometimes, especially when it comes to friends and family members or coworkers that have maybe donated to your adoption journey, whether you've done fundraisers or you're having a GoFundMe. Sometimes when there's money involved and they have donated, they feel like there's a sense of entitlement to your kiddo's
entitlement.
story. Yes. And just because they have supported you, even financially, does not mean that they are entitled to any details about your kiddo's adoption story or your adoption journey.
Yeah, I agree. Now let's talk a little bit about how to get through the holidays, because holidays are hard. When you are wanting to
Yeah.
build a family, they are hard because you're just surrounded constantly by
Mm-hmm.
reminders.
Yep.
And so, what do you recommend? Well, I'll, like from an adoptive parent standpoint, like if you are waiting, like if you are in the wait, no matter how long it's been, I say give yourself some grace during
Mm-hmm.
this holiday period, and don't be afraid to say no or turn down an invitation or say no to, like, you know what, I'm just not up for talking about the journey right now. Like, just
Yeah.
tell people like I don't want to answer any questions right now. Like, we're in the middle of it. We're in the thick of it. I just want to have a really lovely dinner, or I just really want to enjoy this party, and I will update you early next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're your friends and family. 99.9% of the time, I am sure that they are going to understand that and respect that and not push you.
Yeah.
And
I do think because we live in this age of like constant updates all the time, that
yeah,
we just kind of get conditioned to it, and like, oh, what's the update? Like how many families have you talked to? Or like, that kind of, and it's just, it is okay to just take yourself off that hamster wheel
yep,
and just, you know what? There hasn't been a significant update since I talked to you last, and I'll give you another one, in January, February.
yeah. You have to take care of you. The holidays are difficult enough in any season of life, let alone in this season when you're trying to grow your family. And you have to take care of you at the end of the day. Take care of you and your immediate family.
Yeah. And
And I,
I'm sure, like the reaction to that would probably just be hugs. If somebody told me that,
Yeah.
I would just hug them.
Same. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think,
What about just for people that have already adopted? What is any kind of tips, any tips for them in terms of like relationship with the birth family or like gift giving, that kind of thing?
yeah, I think my biggest tip for or advice, for navigating the holiday season is first and foremost, don't forget about your kiddo's birth family. I know, especially that first set of holidays when you've adopted and you have this kiddo in your home that you've been waiting so long for. It's so easy to get caught up in that first Thanksgiving and first Christmas and all the things that you do with a new kiddo in the house. But please don't forget your kiddo's birth family, or specifically their birth parents. And, no matter what season your open adoption is in or your adoption is in, if it's kind of closed right now or they aren't being super communicative, don't not reach out and wish them happy holidays. Don't forget to send them a card, to send them a gift, to send them something to let them know that you are thinking of them. We have a great holiday gift guide, gift giving for your kiddo's birth parents. We will link it in the show notes, but it kind of breaks down all sorts of different options based on where you are on your adoption journey, kind of what season your adoption is in. And so if you have already adopted or you are matched with an expectant mom, I would really recommend checking that out and getting some advice or guidance in making sure that you remember your kiddo's birth parents this holiday season.
Yeah, and I was also going to say, even if you don't have a a relationship with them right now, in addition to like you need to attempt. I think it's always like what Jess is
Yes.
saying, like you have to attempt to reach out to them.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I think you can be doing that I think is really nice is you can just open up a Google Doc
Yeah.
and you can write what you would want them to know right now, because
Mm-hmm.
even if you're in a period of time where it's not necessarily quote unquote open or there's the lines of communication aren't going back and forth, they might one day. And
Yeah.
I think how great to have kind of a treasure trove of your feelings that they would be able to read through when the time is right.
Yeah. Do the Christmas artwork, make the handprint turkeys or the Christmas art and put it in a box for when that relationship is open again or when you have that correct address or they're ready to receive things from you. Then think of how wonderful they're going to feel when they can get these things and see these things and know that they were thought of during the holiday season.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that might be a good place to call this one, Jess. But anything else?
Yeah.
Any instead of a magic wand, maybe just a grateful?
Yeah. I think, going into Thanksgiving this week, it's a great time to just say how thankful we are to everyone that listens to this podcast for all of the value you are getting out of it. And then to all the families that trust us to help them on this very complex journey.
Yeah, I don't it's not at all lost on either one of us how kind of the honor that we have in the place that we're in to get to provide some level of support to professionals and families and moms, just the entire ecosystem, in an effort to make it better. Because I mean, we this year I am like, tears welling up in my eyes, so grateful to the Pear Tree team and to the professionals that have joined us on this journey, because I think it's this year specifically is the most I've ever seen it where they're just like the momentum of
Hmm.
ethical change desired
Yeah,
in professionals from across this country. It is really buoying and totally motivating. So
it is.
that's I think what I am most grateful for, because it's true. It's the saying exists for a reason. There is power in numbers, and when the numbers want ethical positive change, guess what's going to happen?
Ethical positive
So
change.
very grateful. And I think we will close it out. So if you want to give us some kind of a gift this holiday season, I think the best gift that you can give us is subscribing to this podcast, so that number one, you won't miss an episode. And then if you really want to give us a gift, a 5-star rating would be great, because that will tell other people like, hey, this podcast is worth listening to.
Yes.
And then
We would
obviously if
love
you
that.
yes, we would. Yes. And so if you have a topic also that you want us to talk about or address, be sure to let us know. And you can email jess@peartreefamily.com, and we'll link that in the show notes too. But to this entire community, anybody listening, we know time is so valuable, and we are very, very grateful that you shared your time with us. And happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Modern Adoption, and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss an episode.
And we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode full of education, insight, and important conversations.